I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who falls for her boss. Throughout my entire career, I prided myself on being professional, focused, and completely immune to workplace romance. Office relationships are trouble, I'd tell my friends over happy hour martinis. They always end in disaster. But life has a funny way of humbling you, doesn't it? Of taking all your certainties and tossing them right out the window when you least expect it. It started 18 months ago, when I transferred to the Chicago office. After my divorce was finalized, I needed a fresh start. New city, new apartment, new role. At 42, I felt both liberated and terrified. 15 years of marriage had left me feeling like half a person, unsure of who I was outside of being Mark's wife. The transfer was my lifeline, a chance to reinvent myself. The Chicago skyline welcomed me with open arms that September morning. The sun glinted off Lake Michigan as I navigated downtown, the GPS guiding me to the gleaming glass tower that would be my new workplace. I remember smoothing down my charcoal pencil skirt, taking a deep breath, and stepping into the elevator with as much confidence as I could muster. "Hold the door, please." I reached out automatically, pressing the door open button just as a man in a navy suit rushed in, slightly out of breath. "Thank you," he said, flashing me a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "Cutting it close today." I smiled back politely, noticing how the corners of his eyes crinkled when he grinned. He was tall, tall enough that I had to tilt my head up to meet his gaze, even in my heels. Salt and pepper hair, broad shoulders, and a presence that somehow made the elevator feel smaller. "New face," he observed, pressing the button for the 34th floor. The same floor I was headed to. "First day? Is it that obvious?" I laughed, feeling the knot in my stomach loosen just a fraction. "The look of determined courage gives it away," he replied. "I'm Daniel Stevens." My heart sank as I realized who was standing next to me. Daniel Stevens, my new boss, the regional director whose reputation preceded him, brilliant, demanding, and according to office gossip, recently divorced himself. "Catherine Walsh," I managed, extending my hand. "Your new marketing director." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps, before he grasped my hand. His palm was warm and firm against mine. "Catherine," he repeated, as if testing how my name felt on his tongue. "Welcome aboard." That handshake lasted a second too long. We both felt it, that imperceptible pause, the slight reluctance to let go. And in hindsight, that was the moment. The tiny seed, from which everything else would grow. The first few months were professional to a fault. Daniel was an excellent boss, challenging but fair, pushing me to think bigger and dig deeper into every campaign I developed. He never micromanaged, instead trusting my expertise while offering guidance when needed. Our weekly one-on-one meetings became the highlight of my workdays, conversations flowing easily from quarterly projections to favorite novels to the best deep dish pizza spots in the city. "You've transformed the Westfield account," he told me one evening as we pored over presentation, slides, takeout containers pushed to the side of the conference table. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, but we were riding the momentum of a breakthrough idea. "They were ready to walk before you came on board." "Team effort," I demurred, but secretly basked in his praise. "Take the damn compliment, Catherine," he said, his voice warm with amusement. "You're good at what you do. Exceptional, actually." I looked up from my laptop to find him watching me, his expression unreadable in the dimmed office lighting. Something electric passed between us, a current that had been building for weeks despite my best efforts to ignore it. "Thank you," I said quietly, holding his gaze for a beat longer than necessary before deliberately turning back to the presentation. "I think we should revise this section on social media integration." We both knew what was happening, even as we carefully sidestepped it. The casual touches that lingered, his hand on my shoulder as he leaned over to look at my screen, my fingers brushing his when passing documents. The inside jokes, the text messages that gradually evolved from work-related to personal, the way his voice softened when we were alone. Winter settled over Chicago with a vengeance that year. Snow piled in drifts against buildings, and the wind off the lake cut through layers like a knife. I found myself staying later at the office, telling myself it was dedication to the job rather than an unwillingness to return to my empty apartment, rather than an excuse to spend more time with Daniel. The holiday party changed everything. Hosted at the Peninsula Hotel, it was a lavish affair. Open bar, gourmet buffet, live band playing jazz standards. I wore a burgundy dress, simple but elegant, with a neckline that dipped just low, enough to feel brave. Daniel's eyes found me the moment I walked in, widening slightly before he schooled his features back to professional neutrality. "You look beautiful," he murmured hours later, appearing at my side as I stood by the windows, watching snow swirl against the dark sky. The band was playing The Way You Look Tonight, and most of our colleagues were either dancing or pleasantly buzzed at their tables. "So do you," I replied without thinking, then laughed at myself. "I mean, handsome. You look handsome." The 2 glasses of champagne I'd consumed made me bold, loosening the careful restraint I normally exercised around him. He chuckled, the sound low and intimate. "I'll take either compliment." He was standing close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woodsy with notes of cedar. Dance with me? I knew I should say no. Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was the line, that stepping onto that dance floor would acknowledge what we'd been so careful to avoid. But I found myself nodding, placing my hand in his outstretched one. His palm settled at the small of my back as we moved among the other couples. Perfectly appropriate, nothing. That would raise eyebrows. Yet I felt branded by his touch, hyper-aware of each finger pressed gently against my dress. "I've been thinking about you," he confessed, his voice so low I almost missed it over the music. "More than I should." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Daniel?" "I know," he interrupted. "I know all the reasons why this is complicated. I'm your boss. We work together. Office politics. I've made that list in my head 100 times. And yet?" I prompted, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. His eyes, blue-gray like a winter lake, met mine. "And yet I can't stop." The song ended. We stood frozen while couples around us shifted, waiting for the next number. Reality crashed back in, colleagues just feet away, watchful eyes, professional reputations on the line. "I should go," I whispered, stepping back. "Thank you for the dance." I gathered my coat and purse and slipped out into the snow-muffled night before he could respond. My Uber driver found me half a block away, shivering not from cold, but from the weight of what had just transpired. What hadn't yet happened, but seemed suddenly, terrifyingly inevitable. The week between Christmas and New Year's was mercifully quiet at the office. A skeleton crew, most people taking vacation days. Daniel was traveling, visiting his daughter at college in California. The distance gave me breathing room, time to think clearly without his presence muddying my judgment. I made lists, pros and cons, meticulously, categorized like the marketing strategies I developed. On paper, the cons crushed the pros. Potential career damage, office gossip, power imbalance, the risk of another heartbreak when I was still healing from my marriage. But logic couldn't capture the way my spirits lifted when he walked into a room, or how our conversations challenged and engaged me on every level, or the profound feeling that I'd found someone who saw me, truly saw me, for the first time in years. He texted on New Year's Eve, "Watching fireworks over San Francisco Bay and thinking of you. Happy New Year, Catherine." I stared. At those words in my quiet apartment, Ryan Seacrest counting down on muted TV, and made my decision. "I've been thinking about you too. All the time. Happy New Year, Daniel." When he returned to the office January 2nd, something had shifted. We still maintained professional boundaries at work, but there was an acknowledgement now, an understanding that this thing between us was real and mutual. We began meeting for coffee before work. Neutral territory, a cafe 3 blocks from the office where we weren't likely to run into colleagues. "We should talk about this," he said one morning in late January, steam rising from his Americano. Outside, Chicago was gripped in a deep freeze, temperatures dipping below zero. "About us." "Is there an IS?" I asked, wrapping my cold fingers around my mug. His eyes held mine. "I think there could be, if we want it." "It's complicated," I sighed, giving voice to the obvious. "It is," he agreed. "I'm your boss. There are HR policies. People will talk. My divorce was barely finalized a year ago," I added. "And yours too." "Yes." He nodded, then leaned forward slightly. "But Catherine, at our age, hasn't life taught us that the things worth having rarely come without complications?" I couldn't help but smile. "Are you saying I'm worth having, Daniel?" "I'm saying I haven't felt this way in a very long time," he replied, suddenly serious. "And I'm not willing to dismiss it without exploring where it might lead. But," he added carefully, "this has to be your choice too. No pressure. If you want to keep things strictly professional, I'll respect that completely. Nothing changes at work." I stared into my coffee, thinking about second chances and risks worth taking. What would it look like if we explored this? "Carefully," he said. "Discreetly, at least at first. And I'd speak to HR about recusing myself from your performance reviews and salary decisions. Eleanor in the New York office could handle those." He'd thought about the practical aspects, I realized. This wasn't impulsive for him either. "I need a little time," I told him honestly. To be sure, February in Chicago brings a special kind of emotional fatigue. The holidays long over, spring still a distant promise, nothing but gray skies and dirty snow. But that February was different. Each day held possibility, electricity humming beneath ordinary moments. Daniel respected my request for time, maintaining our professional relationship while the undercurrent between us strengthened. It was a Tuesday evening when I finally made my decision. We were the last two in the office again, reviewing the quarterly marketing plan. My jacket was draped over the back of my chair, sleeves rolled up as I gestured toward projection charts. Daniel had loosened his tie hours earlier, his usually immaculate appearance softened by the late hour. The digital ad spend should shift more toward. I stopped mid-sentence, suddenly overwhelmed by the absurdity of discussing ROI, metrics when all I could think about was the curve of his mouth, the subtle strength in his forearms revealed by rolled-up shirt sleeves. "Catherine?" he prompted when my silence stretched too long. "I've been thinking," I said quietly, setting down my pen, "about what you said. About us." The marketing plan was instantly forgotten. He sat completely still, watching me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "And?" His voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. I took a deep breath. "And I think some things are worth the risk." The smile that spread across his face, then, slow, genuine, illuminating his eyes, is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. He reached across the table, palm up in invitation. I placed my hand in his, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. "I was hoping you'd say that," he admitted. We moved carefully at first, navigating the delicate transition from colleagues to something more. Our first real date was dinner at a small French bistro in Andersonville, far from the downtown haunts frequented by coworkers. I wore a simple black dress I'd bought specially for the occasion, and when Daniel looked at me across the candlelit table, I felt beautiful in a way I hadn't in years. "You know," he said, refilling my wine glass, "I noticed you the moment you joined the Chicago team. Not just because you're stunning, though you are, but because of how you handled the Wilson pitch that first week. You were fearless." I laughed. "I was terrified, completely out of my depth." "That's the definition of courage, isn't it? Feeling the fear and doing it anyway." His eyes held mine. Like what we're doing now. And he was right. I was afraid. Afraid of being vulnerable again, of risking my heart and my career on something that might not last. But sitting across from him, watching how his face animated when he talked about his daughter's art major or the novel he was currently reading, I knew I would regret not taking this chance far more than I would regret taking it. We told HR in March. Daniel, true to his word, arranged for my performance reviews to be handled by Eleanor from the New York office. There were raised eyebrows, of course, and whispers that followed me into conference rooms. Some colleagues were supportive. Others clearly wondered if my relationship with Daniel had influenced my rapid rise in the company. I held my head high, letting my work speak for itself. Spring melted into a glorious Chicago summer. We spent weekends exploring the city like tourists, the Art Institute on rainy Sundays, outdoor concerts in Millennium Park, Cubs games where Daniel taught me the finer points of baseball, while sharing overpriced beer and hot dogs. His condo overlooking the river became as familiar to me as my own apartment, his bookshelf gradually accumulating my favorite novels alongside his. It wasn't all easy. We had our first major fight in August, a simmering tension that boiled over after a stressful week at work. I accused him of undermining me in a client meeting. He countered that I was being overly sensitive because of our relationship. We went 3 days without speaking outside of necessary work interactions, both too stubborn to bend. This is why office romances are doomed, I told my sister during a tearful phone call. The lines get blurred, everything gets complicated. All relationships get complicated, she reminded me gently. The question is whether he's worth working through the complications. He was. We talked it out that weekend, establishing clearer boundaries between our professional and personal lives. It was the first test of our relationship, and passing it made us stronger. In September, we flew to Colorado to meet his daughter, Olivia. I was nervous. She was 20, a college junior, with her father's blue-gray eyes and a wary expression when we first met at the Denver airport. But by our second day hiking through Rocky Mountain National Park, something thawed between us. She showed me her sketchbook, full of astoundingly good drawings, and asked about my own college days studying marketing. I've never seen my dad this happy, she told me our last night there, as we washed dishes side by side while Daniel built a fire in the rental cabin's fireplace. Not even before the divorce. Her words settled something in me, a lingering doubt I hadn't fully acknowledged. Daniel and I have been together for a year now. Last month, I moved into his riverside condo, my furniture mingling with his in a way that feels surprisingly right. We still work together, though there's talk of me heading up a new division, a promotion earned through results, not relationship, that would put us in different departments entirely. This morning I woke before dawn to find him watching me, propped up on one elbow with an expression so tender it made my chest ache. "What?" I murmured, self-conscious. "I was just thinking how lucky I am," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "That you held the elevator that day." I smiled, leaning into his touch. "That you were running late. That we both took a risk." Outside the window, the first light of day silvered the Chicago River. I thought about the woman I was 18 months ago, wounded, cautious, convinced that the safest path was the right one. I barely recognize her now. Here's what I've learned. Sometimes the things we're most certain about, like never falling for your boss, are the very certainties life delights in challenging. Sometimes breaking your own rules leads you exactly where you need to be. And sometimes the greatest risk is not taking any risk at all. I know, there will be challenges ahead. Office politics don't disappear overnight. Relationships require constant navigation. But this morning, watching the sun rise over Chicago with Daniel's arm around me, I'm certain of one thing. Some temptations aren't meant to be resisted. Some are meant to be embraced, with all their complications and uncertainties and beautiful, unexpected rewards. And I wouldn't change a single moment of ours.